Hi my loves, welcome to another tutorial on olives. Today I'm going to share with you how to cut and sew a two-piece outfit, mainly a trouser and a simple kimono top or jacket. I just want you to keep on watching. It is kind of long but detailed. Relax, keep on watching, no skipping. My name is Olivia. Subscribe to the channel and let's get right into this video. I'll be using this printed fabric which is about 4 yards, so we will begin by directly drafting the trousers and then we'll use the remaining material to draft out the kimono jacket. Basically, I'm going to be using my tie measurement to fold my fabric, and the tie measurement I'm using is 24 inches. I added extra 1 inch. I'm going to cut it out and this is what I have. I'll draw in the starting point, which is the yellow line you are seeing, and we are going to be using a hip of 40. We need to determine the most important part of a trouser, which is crotch. By dividing my hip by 4, I have 10. I'm going to add an extra 1.5 inch. This trouser is going to be a little high-waisted. The extra inch I added is 1 inch, which is 11. The half inch is going to be used to join the waist of the trouser to the band. Okay, so if you want a more high-waisted trouser, then you use like 2 inches extra attached to quarter of your hip. I'll be using a band depth of 1.5 inches, so I'm going to deduct that from the total crotch depth that I have, and I'm going to mark my 11.5 inches here. And above this 11.5 inches, I'll go up by 2 inches to determine the hip of this trouser. I'll mark this across my fabric. From there, we can now input the length of the trouser. So mine is 41 inches. I'll mark this and add an extra 1.5 inch for hemming allowance. Mark it across the fabric. This particular trouser is going to be a palazzo, a free trouser, okay? But if you want to note your waist to knee, you mark down from the crotch depth to the length of your trouser. Divide the distance into 2 like this, and then you just move up from here by 2 inches to determine your knee line. From the edge of my folded fabric, I'll mark in 1 inch, and that will be my border line. Now, away from the border line, knowing well the quarter of my hip is 10 inches, I'll mark it here and mark it on the waist, put it into a straight line. Now on the waist, I'll mark quarter of my waist plus half inch. This half inch will serve as allowance, so I'm just going to start measuring from here like this and mark my 7.5 inches. Right on my crotch depth, I'm going to divide my tie measurement by 2 and add extra half inch. My tie measurement is 24 divided by 2 is 12 plus half inch, 12.5 inches. So this is what I have left, and that is it. From the intercept of these lines, I'll go out by 1 inch to create my crotch. So I'm just going to bring in my curve and blend them together as shown. Since this is just going to be a free trouser, which is also known as palazzo, we are just going to maintain whatever measurement we have here, which means the tie measurement we use is going to be the same measurement as the hem. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is to shape my waist to meet my hip, just like this. And now I'm going to be adding pockets to this trouser. From the side of my waist, I'll mark in 2 inches like this. I'll then mark the depth of my pocket, which is going to be about 7 inches, right from the waist down like this. I'll mark in half inch and connect it to the 2 inches I marked up. Yeah, so that is it for the marking of the pocket. From the center crotch, I'll mark down 3/4 inch and connect this marking to the waist of the trouser as shown. The first process we just went through is for the front. We'll move on to use the front to cut out the back piece. So I'll fold my fabric again into 2. This time the fold will have enough room to accommodate the back, okay? So you can add about 4 inches extra to the width you used initially for the front. I made sure to leave about 2.5 inches above the waist of the front on the back piece, okay? And I'm just going to redirect the crotch depth of the front to the back, okay? Right here, I'll mark a back crotch extension of 3 inches. Along the knee line, which we have not outlined but the mark is there, I'm just going to mark 2 inches as allowance, okay? If your hip is less than 40 at the crotch extension, you may just use 2.5 inches, okay? At the lower part here, I'll use 1.5 inches. You might as well just maintain the 2 inches for allowance. That means if you use 2 inches, you are going to stitch just about half inch. But using 1.5 inch means that I'm going to stitch less than half inch as allowance. And then we move on to connect all these points together like this, and on the back extension beneath the crotch depth, I'll go down by half inch like this, okay? And then just curve in the thigh area and blend it to the knee. Now along the waist area for the back, I'll mark 1.5 inch allowance like this and use a straight line to connect it upwards this way. So above this line here, I'll mark 2 inches. So these 2 inches will accommodate the curved shape we have at the back. I'll connect this point to meet the side seam. I'll also use this hip curve to connect the back crotch together. The final thing is to cut out, but in case you would like to add that to your trousers, it means that while dividing your waist by 4, you have to add 1 inch dart allowance. To mark your darts, divide your thigh measurement, which is the front, into 2. Measure from the center crotch here like this. Whatever measurement you have, mark the same thing here. Then you can take half inch on both sides as that. The dart depth can be about 5 inches or 5.5 inches. Just mark it and make sure you put it into a straight line and also connect your dart legs together. Please remember to add the 1 inch dart allowance to your measurement while calculating, okay? Next, we'll go ahead to cut our pocket bag. I'll bring in my front, and from the center crotch of the front, I'll mark out 1.5 inch, and away from this 1.5 inch, the leftover measurement, which is 6.5, will be the width of my pocket bag for the top part of my pocket bag, okay? The width of the fabric I folded is about 8 inches, and the depth of this pocket is just going to be about 10.5 inches, okay? So I'm going to cut 4, so I'm just going to fold it into 4. So the full length of the fabric I'll cut will be 21 inches. So by the time I fold it back into 2 again, which will be 4 times, I should have my 10.5 inches, okay? So I'm just going to place my trouser like this, making sure the 1.5 inch I took off from the center crotch of the trouser is away, right? And here I have 8 inches and here 6.5. I'll go ahead to just shape out my pocket bag so it follows the shape of the trouser, okay? I'll notch the 7 inches and the 2 inches if you can recall. So this is my pocket bag. I'm just going to use my free hand and shape out this pocket bag like this. I'll move on to notch the center of both the top and the lower part of the pocket bag, and this is what I have after serging, and this is how it looks like. We'll focus on the pocket, leaving out 3/4 inch from the center crotch of this point like this. I'll join the crotch together, okay? You can as well just work on the pocket before joining, all the same. I'll move on to add interfacing along the pocket area. After joining the crotch, this is how it looks like right now, and this is also the wrong side. I went ahead to press it and also iron the interfacing. Also, if you will be using that, if you'll be sewing that, make sure to sew the dart before you work on the pocket, okay? So I'm going to fold from the 7 inches and the 2 inches like this and press it, okay, this way. And this is the pocket bag. I'll pick one. I'll mark the wrong side of the pocket bag. So by marking the wrong side of the pocket bag, we know the wrong side of the fabric, okay? I'm going to place the right side of the pocket bag to the right side of the trouser like this, pin them together. You know the crease line that we made, we are going to stitch along that crease line. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and stitch towards that crease line. At this point, all I'll say is that you take a good look at how I am sewing so you can get it. Okay, so I'm stitching on the crease line. I'll take it this way, stitch, then when I get to the break point where the 7 inches ends, I'll take it up to the waist. So here is how I've stitched. So here is how it looks like. I've opened up the pocket bag and I'm going to stitch the excess that I have towards the pocket bag, or let me say on the pocket bag. Okay, I'm going to pull it this way and I'm going to stitch. So this is how it looks like right now. By the way, before I stitch the excess together, I make sure to notch where the 7 inches end, and so this is how I have it. I'm going to go ahead and give it a top stitch up to the waist. I would say that we should have a different tutorial which will be detailed on how to make pockets. Okay, but this is how it looks like from the center. I'm just going to pin them together. Now normally this is how the pockets should look like, right? All right, so please look at what I'm going to do. I'll pick the trouser, that's the pockets, like this, and fold it this way. All I did was to make sure that the wrong side of the pocket bag face each other like this. I believe you can see it, and I'm just going to stitch along the wrong side. What we are trying to do here is to make a French stitch or a French seam. Okay, yeah, a French seam. So I'm just going to trim off the excess, turn it inside out like this, so you can see the wrong side, right? So this is how it will look like. Now we won't leave it this way, we'll go ahead to make a top stitch, then we can call this a French seam. Okay, so after stitching, this is how it looks like. This is a French seam. So if I turn it inside out, we are not going to see any allowance here. Do you see that? Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is to meet the edge of the pocket to the 2 inches notch on the other side of the pocket bag like this, so you could have something like this. Okay, next I'm going to pick the edge, the waistline of the pocket bag to also meet the waistline of the trouser like this and make a top stitch. That is it. I'm done with this part of the pocket. I'll move on to also do the other side of the pocket. So here is how it looks like after working on both pockets. And this is also the back piece. The same 3/4 inch we left from the beginning of the crotch here, I left the same thing on the back. Now let me explain to you why I did this. Okay, this is because I want both front and back crotch to align. Instead of joining the inner thigh of the trouser together at once, this is also another way of joining the crotch together. Okay, still on the back, from the top I'll measure down 9.5 inches. You might as well just do it 10 inches. This is where the zip will be fixed. I want my zip to be fixed at the back. Okay, so wherever this 9.5 inches ends, I'm going to stitch and make sure it ends up the 3/4 inch on the back crotch like this. Moving on, I'll pin both sides of the trouser, that is the front and the back, together and just join them together with 1/2 inch. So here is how it looks like after joining. I also went ahead to fix my zip. Okay, but let me show you how I went about the whole thing. Before I fixed my zip, assuming I haven't stitched my sides, as in the sides of the trouser, okay, I'm going to use a pin. So you use a pin to hold about 1/2 inch on the sides, because that is what you are going to use to stitch the sides. Okay, then I'll hold the back and the front crotch like this, then measure from the front crotch through to the back and divide your waist by 2. Whatever measurement you have, you mark it. So after marking, whatever excess you have is going to be your back allowance. Okay, so you take note of that back allowance, and that is what is going to help you to work on your zip. Okay, you stitch it and then fix your zip. So for me, I use the lap zip method for the back. You can as well use it for the center crotch of the front. Okay, then after fixing the zip, you can easily stitch your sides together. So that is how I went about the whole thing. Now we'll go ahead and stitch the crotch together. After leaving the 3/4 inch of both front and back crotch, this is how it looks like. I'm going to pin the inner thigh together and then move on to stitch just about 1/2 inch. I'll repeat the same thing to the other side of the inner thigh, stitch them together with 1/2 inch to the hem. I'll move on to work on the waistband. The depth of the waistband is going to be 1.5 inches, and whatever measurement I am going to use for the length is the measurement on the trouser from one side of the center front crotch to the back, including the allowance. So I've cut 2 because I want the center front of my band to also have a seam line. Okay, I went ahead to also add extra 1/2 inch allowance so I could sew the 2 bands together. Okay, so this is my trouser. Coming back to the trouser, I've joined it with 1/2 inch, that is the inner thigh. And what I'm going to do now is to grab the front crotch and the back crotch together, open the inner thigh allowance like this one side, and also open this one. Okay, this way the seam lines will meet and I'll just join them together. Okay, just close that little gap there. I also went ahead to fold up my 1.5 inch allowance at the hem and stitched it round. This is my band. The top part of this band is unfold, so the total length or depth of the fabric I cut was 2 inches. 1/2 inch will be used as allowance. Having these 2 bands together, I'll move on to stitch with 1/2 inch, and this will serve as the center front of my trouser. You can as well just keep it on fold. Okay, so this is the crotch, that's both front and back crotch together, so it just has a flow, and I'm just going to go ahead and attach my band. This is the center front. I pressed the seam open and I'm just going to use one side of the band. I'll start from the right side using the part of the band that has the interfacing. The other side does not have interfacing. Okay, I'll open up the zip and just pin it together. So this is how my zip looks like. This is the lap zip, and the other part that overlaps one side, I'm going to make sure that that particular band extends about 1 inch, so I'm going to make sure that I have enough excess of the band at that point. Okay, so I'll move on to stitch my band together, and this is how it looks like. Now this is the side that is going to overlap more. I'll flip my band backwards like this and make sure I have an extra 1 inch, which will be the overlap. Okay, the extra extension. The other side is just going to be stitched this way. So this is how I have stitched it. I went ahead to sew it this way and ended at where the lap starts. I hope I'm making sense. I'll turn it inside out, and this is what I have. All right, this other side I'm just going to trim off the excess and turn it inside out. So what I'm going to do next is to fold in the 1/2 inch. I'll fold it inward, and my band is going to look like this. As I fold, I'm going to pin it at the right side, and what I'm going to do is to just top stitch on the right side. I'll close my zip so you can see how it looks like. So this is how it goes. One side will just overlap the other. You can as well use a pressed thread or a button. So this is a closer look of the top stitch. This is the right side, and here is how the wrong side also looks like. With our 2-piece outfit, we are done with the trouser, and this is how it looks like. This is the result of the trouser tutorial. So I would say we should move on to the kimono jacket. Simple. All right, so I'm just going to make use of the rest of the material I have left, and by folding it into 2 like this, let's try measuring to see the amount of fabric left. So from measuring like this, I have about 33 and half left that is folded into two. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to fold this whole material into four. Already it is folded into two, so I'll fold it into two again like this. I've marked the starting point like this, and I'm going to input the length of the kimono jacket, which is about 34 inches. I'll add 1.5 inch as allowance. I'll keep this aside for the neck band. Alright, so this is unfold, which is the center front as well as the center back, and here will be the side of our kimono jacket. From the center of the shoulder line, you have to determine how long you want your kimono sleeve together with the shoulder to be, right? So I'm going to use about 15 inches, 1 inch allowance. Okay, I'm going to mark it this way. I'll mark it down here as well. I'll mark down a depth of 10 inches from the shoulder like this. Alright, so I'll put it into a straight line this way. On that line, I'll mark quarter of the bust, which is 34, and mark it here from the center this way. And here you add extra 2 inches, 2.5 to about 5 inches, depending on how free you want your kimono to be or how free you want to be in the kimono. Alright, so I'll add about 4 inches, and this 4 inches includes allowance. From the intercept of these two lines, I'll go out by 1 inch like this and use a curve to connect and blend whatever I have here, and I'll exclude that 1 inch hemming allowance around the sleeve while I curve, so it will look like this. So here I have 4 inches. Okay, now with whatever measurement I have here, it should be enough for my hip area as well. Okay, so I have here about the total measurement multiplied by 4 is around 50 inches, and the hips is 40, so that's about 10 inches ease around the hip area. What I'm trying to say is the 4 inches ease allowance we added is enough for the hip area of the kimono, but if you want much more ease around the hip area, what you do is you locate your waist to hip, and then you curve it from here like this down to the hem of your kimono. Or you can as well just keep the measurement from here, just as I mentioned. Whatever measurement you have here, you just locate your waist to hip and measure it on the hip like this, and you just make a straight line to the hem. Okay, or you just add about 2 inches or 1.5 inch to whatever result you have above your kimono and just connect it this way. With all the examples I just gave, you can curve your kimono however you would like to. Okay, with this current shape, all I'm going to do is to connect from the hip down to the hem with a straight line like this. So yours should look like this or something similar. Moving on to the neck, I'll use a neck width of about 2 3/4 inch. You might as well work with 3 inches. From the starting point, I'll mark down a neck depth of 3/4 inch like this and curve my neckline. So this is for both the front and the back for the meantime. I'll move on to add 1/2 inch above the starting line, which will serve as joining allowance. What I'll do next is to notch these important parts. Now remember, this center front and center back are the same. Okay, so I'm going to remove one, which is the inner one, and this is going to serve as the front since we have the markings on it. Now the front neckline is going to look like a V neckline, a connect down. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to mark down like this from the shoulder this way diagonally 14 inches. You might as well do deeper or higher. All right, so I'm going to connect this point to the neck width like this. So all I'm going to do is to cut and then cut through this line to the hem. So here the sewing section is easier. All I'm going to do is to join the shoulders together, both front and back shoulders, pin them and join with 1/2 inch allowance. So now after joining, or let's assume I've joined with pin, I'm going to take the measurement from one part of the hem this way through to the back. Okay, now the tape will not go beyond, so I'm going to stop at the center back like this. I had 40, so double of that is going to be 80. Okay, so let's cut the neckband. This is it. It's already on fold at this point, so I'll assume that will be the center back, and I'll make sure I have about 40 from the center, the folded part, and I'm going to fold it this way. I want the width to be 2 inches. I'll add extra 1/2 inch to join the band to the neckline or the kimono. So I'm just going to cut about 2.5 inch this way using the length. So this is what I have. So a very long strap, and I've gone ahead to join the shoulders and knitting it with bias. I also went ahead to hem the sleeve, leaving out a little space to be able to like blend them together afterwards. Okay, you will understand, and I'm sure you do already. So all I'm going to do is to hold it together, okay, with the space I left after hemming. I'm just going to pin and stitch with 1/2 inch down to the hem this way. I'll do the same thing to this other side, and here is what it looks like after hemming the sides. The curved area of the armhole is not relaxed, so I will notch this way. When I just align it, it will just lay nicely. Okay, the last thing is to add the neckband. This is the center of the neckband. I'll pin it to the center back, and then all I'm going to do is to pin round. Meanwhile, the band is on fold. Okay, this band being on fold, I just held them together before I began to pin. So here is what it looks like at the hem. When I'm done stitching, I'll just trim off the excess. After stitching, I decided to put it on to have a feel of it, and this is how it looks like. Very free, simple. After attaching the neckband or strap, I went ahead to also turn a lay at the hem, and then I stitched it around, and this is how it looks like. Alright love, this is the end of this tutorial. I hope you learned something. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we will meet in our next tutorial.